Welcome to the In My Opinion show with Ronald Barry Robinson and friends, seen on the internet 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. To view, please access flinttalkradio.com and scroll to the In My Opinion show to view the latest in internet television. Our shows are seen also on Flint, Michigan Comcast Television Cable Channel 17 every Wednesday at 8:30 a.m. and every Saturday at 6 p.m. This show is also seen on Comcast Channel 68, Detroit, Michigan, 7 days a week. Today I have an interesting guest, and we're going to discuss a subject matter of which most Americans have not heard of yet. But by the year 2050, we will know a lot about this discussion, and it's an ongoing conversation. And this show represents the first of many or several Comcast releases that we're going to have as we move toward 2050, the time at which Americans will no longer, at least white Americans, will no longer be the arithmetic or the political majority in this country. Today I have Robert Garza. Robert Garza is an educator and a consultant, and he's taught at Southwestern School. He got a master's degree from the University of Michigan in public instructions. Mr. Garza, welcome to this show.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Today, we want to talk about two aspects of an interesting phenomenon that's occurring in this country. And that's the point at which Hispanics will raise the segment of the population so that white Americans will no longer be the arithmetic and political majority of this country. And as you know, you superseded the fragment of the African Americans in 2001 or 2000. And it superseded that population by well and ahead of what was projected. It was projected to be 2005. So I would like to have you, first of all, I have a note here that's from, and I don't think I can find it right now, but I'll just talk about it. Okay. I was, as you know, you had the debates the other night with Mitt Romney and Gingrich, and they referred to how they would repair the issue with immigration as it still affects the American border. Give me your reaction to that.
Well, it was interesting. This was on the national news yesterday, and the interviewer asked both candidates, Romney and Gingrich, the same question, how are we going to deal with immigration? And what they were referring to was the immigration coming in from Mexico, not the general immigration that we deal with from world immigrants. So their solution to the problem was that we're going to add more border patrols, we're going to perhaps build a wall, and we're going to also stiffen the fines to the employers who hire the illegal workers that come in from through Mexico from Latin America. So that was their solution. There was no discussion on a comprehensive approach to this problem, and that's what a lot of organizations that represent Hispanics, Latinos in the United States want. They want a comprehensive approach to this, and that can only happen with discussion on the part of the United States. So there has to be like an international or a U.S. Latin American effort to bring about some reform. And if that's not done, it's really not going to work, because what they're saying that the solution is just walls, force, and fines. So
that's offending to Hispanics. But first of all, before we go to that, why don't we set some boundaries and decide some definition of what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Because Hispanics vary very much. For example, sometimes they're called Hispanics, Latinos, Latin, Mexican, Puerto Ricans, and so on and so forth. They're black Hispanics. Could you go through and kind of familiarize us with who those people are and their likely impact upon the American economy?
Yes. Well, the term Hispanic was coined by the government for the purpose of census. So they want to put everybody that's from Spanish-speaking background under one umbrella. And so they're using that term Hispanic. But the term actually means a Spaniard. I mean, Hispano is a Spaniard. So that was done for that particular purpose. Other terms or words that are used are Latino. And Latino, what that means is that Spanish, the language of Spanish, comes from Latin, the Latin language, right? So that's how that term came about. And it refers to people of Spanish-speaking backgrounds. So whether they're here in the United States, or they're in Mexico, Central America, the Caribbean, or South America. So that's how all that section of this part of the Western Hemisphere became to be known as Latin America. Another term that's it's also used is Mexican American. And let me clarify something first for our audience, is that often we get or we forget about the term nationality. Nationality refers to the country that you're tied with or by birth. So we are U.S. nationals. We were born here in the United States, and we are U.S. nationals. A person who's born in Mexico is a Mexican national. And then the other term that sometimes we need to clarify is ethnic. That my ethnic background pertains to the Mexican people, right? But I'm a Mexican American because I was born here in the United States. That's just like the other ethnics that are represented from around the world, where they're German American, French American, Afro American, and so forth. And another term that I'd like the audience to understand is the term illegal alien. Now, illegal alien was first used and first coined way back in 1924 as a result of the Bracero program that we're going to talk about a little bit later on in this program. So it refers specifically since 1924 to the illegals that come in from Mexico into the United States. And then the other one is just undocumented workers. So no matter where you're from, if you're not here legally to work, then you're a non-documented worker. So I hope I clarified that. And then, so we have Mexican American, those who were born here from Mexican background. And we also once in a while hear the term Chicano, Chicano, Chicano. And that was brought up from, well, actually the word goes way, way back in history to the native Indians of Mexico. But it resurfaced in the late 1950s and early 60s. And there was just a group of people said that, there were Mexican Americans. They said that, we prefer to be called Chicanos. And their focus was on civil rights. So, and then there's the term Latin American is also used. So if you're Latin American, all right, you're from a Spanish-speaking background, but you are in the United States. You were born in the United States, Latin American. Or it could refer to, the people from Latin America. One interesting thing that people here in the United States do is they kind of monopolize the word American. Okay, and that's how we hear it every day, whether it's in the news or in the classroom or wherever. We're Americans. We're Americans. But people in the United States tend to forget that all of this Western Hemisphere is the Americas. So people in Canada can be called Americans, the United States, people in Mexico, and on down through Latin America. They are all Americans.
What Americans call Mexicans, when they call themselves Americans, without consideration of other people who live in the Americas, like for example Hispanics, are Hispanics and Latin Americans offended?
Well, they could be, yeah, and some are. But what we also fail to understand is that if we have to realize that in Latin America and in other parts of the world, there are about 21 countries around the world that speak Spanish officially, just like they do in Mexico, just like they do in Spain. So when you approach those people, they prefer to be called their own nationality. So if you're in Spain, okay, they are Spanish, right? If you're in Mexico, they are Mexican. If you are in Colombia, they're Colombian, right? They prefer to be called, if you're in Colombia, they prefer to be called Colombian. Or if they're here, they prefer to be called Colombian and not Hispanic or Latinos or other words. Right?
Is that contrary to the idea that Americans would like to see themselves as a melting pot? And by categorizing yourself into these clusters, unique clusters of different nationalities, are we creating domains of antagonism as we move toward a point in which whites will no longer be the arithmetic or political majorities, and therefore more of the leadership of the United States will fall to these Americans?
Well, as far as the idea of being a melting pot, that the idea of a melting pot has a long history. But originally, the melting pot was actually a play, and it was staged on a stage. And what this was about is that people on one side of the stage, people of color or people from other parts of the world, would go into this pot, and on the other side of the pot, they would come out as American. So that has to do with the ideas of assimilation and that idea that before I went into the pot, I had all my cultural things, right? When I came out of the pot, I left those cultural things behind. That's the idea of the melting pot. But today, Americans use that in a different context sometimes. That, yeah, we want to be a melting pot of different cultures, But sometimes people want to hang on to their cultural things, like language, right? And on the other side, if you're American, traditionally, from the standpoint of the melting pot idea, you need to forget your culture, right? Let's focus, for example, on English. Let's do English only, right? Forget your language.
Okay, but as we become a country that converges on one platform, where Hispanics will have, say, 1/3 of the voting strength in this country, and African Americans 1/4, and whites will have the rest of it. Do you see, as we categorize ourselves in these small groups, that poses a problem for unanimity in the country?
I don't think so. I mean, if you have common goals,
Yeah.
and basically historically with the people of color, their common goal is equality, civil rights, treat me equal like you treat everyone else, Don't let it become something that is just artificial. So no, I don't think so. I think.
Do you think we can reach that pinnacle where we can look at each other as equals, where the platform is leveled enough for us to live?
Well, I certainly would hope so.
When
those are the hopes of I think all people of color and all ethnic groups is that they want equality. And it's the same thing that Barack Obama is talking about. That we need to equalize things.
Well, my concern is that as the population rises and resources decline, the ones who will be standing last are the ones with the most money, the biggest guns, and with the structured authority. Can we, with that kind of a mentality, as we move to about 2050, when we now are truly multicultural, if you want to call it that, because Hispanics and African Americans will form that segment where they will be the controlling numbers in this country along the way.
Well, I also think that the idea of being multicultural nation, we are a multicultural nation, right? But, you know, we say that on one side, but on the other hand, you know, we take it away. It's just like the English only idea, you know. Why, if we're a multicultural nation, you know, why don't we promote language study? Why is there such a fight for this English only idea? And that's the same thing that both candidates today are dealing with. You know, they say, yeah, we are receptive to different people, but we want English only. In fact, that's what Newt Gingrich wants to do. He wants to make it, for some reason in history, that was never done. That English was never made the official language of this country, but he wants that done. And Spanish is the second language unofficially of this country because it's the second most spoken language. But where is the acknowledgement of that? You know, there isn't. You know, most mainstream white Americans want to suppress that. You know, and keep it suppressed. You know?
But
And it's only because of the fear.
yeah, I was just reading a document several weeks ago that the Southwest will be basically Hispanics by the 2050. There's no doubt about it. They will form this great voting bloc. So, therefore, they not only have the numbers, but they have a responsibility.
All right.
Can we meet that responsibility unless we come to common ground?
Well, I think that responsibility is being taken on already and has been by a lot of organizations in the country. So there is support for that, and there is, and I don't want to call it a movement, but it had, those organizations have provided a long history of really bringing that up to the forefront, and groups like, for example, the United Farm Workers with Cesar Chavez, you know. Mm-hmm. He worked on civil rights, you know, and equal rights for a long, long time. And out of that has come the Cesar Chavez Foundation, where they work on that all the time. Other groups like LULAC, who are concerned with civil rights. There are many programs that deal with leadership around the country that are really gearing students, you know, to see the future of Latinos, Hispanics in the United States and the potential there, and the responsibility to come up and really be, you know, one of the leaders. Today we have, and historically we've had a lot of leaders, whether it's in Washington, whether it's at the government, at the state level with governors, in the South with Hispanic governors or congressmen, senators, and congressmen like Marco Rubio from Florida, our Supreme Court Justice, Judge Sotomayor. So I mean, at all levels, you know, there's movement. There's movement.
Yeah, that may be true among Hispanics.
Mm-hmm.
But what about the African Americans? Do they feel the same way about it? What about white Americans? If so, illustrate to us how you would demonstrate that we all feel culturally moving toward the same point where we can govern this country together as we move toward this paradigm shift by 2050.
Well, I think we need to look at it in terms of what's beneficial to all of us. You know, that certainly if a person like me, you know, were educated and can contribute to society, another person the same thing, you know. I mean, going around to different ethnic groups, you know, that we all can contribute to a main cause, you know, and that's being, you know, having a better country to live in, better working conditions, better living conditions, better education, and so forth. I mean, it's beneficial to all of us to work on national goals, and that's just one example.
So, well, what do you think from the standpoint of Hispanics? What should their role be for us to achieve these goals?
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll turn around and ask you, what do you think the role of African Americans ought to be? Not that you can project that they'll do this, but what should their role? Because they have to accept the same kind of responsibility. Then I'm going to ask, what should white Americans be doing now? Not 2050.
Mm-hmm.
That we have to begin doing something now.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we can focus on for sure with Latinos, Hispanics, or the Black community is education. Is that's one of the things that we need to do more of, and we need more support from the white community, because traditionally we've been excluded, and we are doing kind of a catch-up type of thing, right? And there might be people out there saying, don't give me that catch-up business, but it exists, all right? It exists when you take a look at data. For example, if you want to look at a particular college, if you look at this particular college, how many people have you produced with bachelors, with masters, with PhDs, in the area of Latinos, in the area of blacks, in the area of other people, So I mean that's one way that we can look at it, and that's very we can count that, we can measure that. So education is a big thing that we need more support. Right, Latinos, blacks also have a high dropout rate from high school, so we need more with that. We need more people, more students involved in the STEM education, where we deal with science, technology, engineering, math. We need to get more minorities in there. Right? We need to support that. And colleges are, to some extent supporting that, saying that, we need to meet our quota and so forth. So there's work. There's work that has been done, but we need more work. We also need minorities more involved in the nonprofits and still with civil rights, because there's always more to do with that. So those are some of the things that we need support from all people in the United States.
Do you think that's possible with the United States becoming a nation in decline, with the loss of resources, the rising population? Do you think that people have the political will to provide more resources to Hispanics or African Americans, for example, to achieve this level playing field, to appease African Americans or Hispanics? Do you think that that's possible?
Well, it's been possible a lot to this point because of the initiative that the people of color have taken upon themselves, right? That if advancements have been made, it's because of their effort that this has happened. It's because of the effort like people like Cesar Chavez, like people like Martin Luther King, that started that.
But those were under different circumstances. We were a rich country then. We could give away, we could provide for those who were underserved, for example. Today, the budgets, the state budgets, the national budgets, the budgets of companies and so on and so forth are declining. Can this still happen, do you think? And what should the role of white America be to assure that we can bridge this gap?
Well, I think.
Or do you see a gap?
Well, yes, there's many gaps in this country in different areas, but it's to the benefit of all of us that we really need to work cooperatively to really build a nation that's within itself that we can achieve peace among ourselves. I really want to talk a little bit about one issue that I think a lot of Americans, our viewers,
please, we've got about 60 seconds.
60 seconds. And this is the issue that many of our viewers and people in the United States really don't understand where the illegal immigration is coming from. They believe that it's just coming from Mexico, but it's coming from all of Latin America. So it's not just one country, but all the countries in Latin America, because the majority of Latin Americans are very poor, and they will risk their life, they will really risk their life to come here to find a better life or find some financial support for themselves and their family.
I'm glad you said that so that all of the Americans and people around the world heard that. I think that they become loyal Americans once they move inside the United States. They contribute to it financially, they contribute to it economically. And Robert, I want to thank you for taking the courage and the opportunity to be a part of the show today, and to tell us about those issues that Americans face that we need to man up on. And that is, we need to decide among the various entities in the country how we plan to run this country when white Americans are no longer the political or arithmetic dominant people. So I hope that we'll get some feedback, some discussion on this, because this is only the beginning of the many shows that will be used to discuss this as we move closer to 2020.
Certainly a lot to talk about.
Thank you. At this time, we must bring the show to a close, but first we want to thank our viewers, guests. Until next time, stay focused.